Hi, my name is Glenn Morgan, and welcome to We the Governed. This is an exciting video, and I'm thankful that you're able to tune in. With me in the studio today, I am very honored to have a volunteer coordinator for the Washington Voter Research Project, John Clabaugh, who I've known for a little while and who just has been doing phenomenal work helping to clean up the voter rolls in Thurston County and helping to expose issues and problems there. And John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in doing such a wonkish and probably thankless task as looking at voter rolls in Thurston County?
Well, first, Glenn, thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to come here today and kind of talk about some of the things we've been finding as we're looking at our elections in Thurston County. So a little bit about my background. I'm a certified fraud examiner. I've been a fraud investigator for the last 15 years. 13 years of that was with the state of Washington. Worked at several different agencies, investigated several different types of fraud. And so I have a very strong investigative background. And when I first started hearing after the 2020 election and all of the claims that were being made about voter fraud, I thought, I have some skills that I think might be useful in this public debate that's going on. Because on the one hand, you have people saying, well, everything's completely safe and secure, there's no problems in elections. And then on the other hand, you have people saying, well, it's totally rigged. And I think the truth is somewhere in between. And so I thought, partially too, as out of professional curiosity, like how can I employ my skill set in this new domain in a way that helps kind of illuminate what people are talking about and to give people actual facts about what's going on with our elections as opposed to various claims floating around out there.
As you've been looking at some of the issues in the voter rolls in Thurston County, and you focus in Thurston County, which is where you live, where I live, so it's kind of my home county. I'm very interested in these issues. What are just some of the things that you uncovered as you got involved in this whole process that probably surprised you?
Some of the surprising things were that, like for example, through doing voter challenges, which we've been doing in Thurston County, we're finding that some things...
Let's stop. What's a voter challenge? You can explain for our viewers, what is an actual voter challenge?
Sure. A voter challenge is a legal process that's set out in the Washington State RCW that is a way for a registered voter to challenge another voter's registration, whether they think the person doesn't live there anymore, non-citizen, deceased. There's different reasons you can challenge. And so you fill out a voter challenge form, you gather evidence and information to support your challenge and send that to the county auditor. The county auditor will hold a hearing where they consider the evidence that the challenger submits. They'll show their own evidence that they have from their own files. And then either the auditor or the canvassing board will make a determination. Is the challenge, is the challenge sustained? Do we cancel this voter from the voter rolls or cancel their ballot? Or is there some reason why this voter should remain on the voter rolls?
Right.
And by going through that process, what we're doing is we're getting facts on the record, in individual cases, actual evidence of this individual maybe moved to another state, several years ago, but they're still registered to vote and voting from a Thurston County address that they don't reside at. Why is that? And so some of the things we found as we're doing those, I think first of all, it's important to know, there are some exceptions to the residency requirements. So Washington state law and federal law says that if under certain circumstances, a person can vote from an address they don't reside at.
Sure.
So military, people overseas, college students away at college,
right.
Someone navigating the high seas,
right.
Those people, they meet an exception so they can be, legitimately registered somewhere where they don't live.
Right.
So those aren't the ones that we're going after in our voter challenges. We're looking at the ones that don't appear to have an exception on file and where it seems like something was missed. In most cases, there was a U.S. Postal Service change of address filed for this voter. The voter moved to another county or state in most cases, yet somehow they're still registered at their old Thurston County address. And sometimes these voters are getting updated right away. Sometimes it's years before the file actually gets updated. And so we wanted to find out why that is. And
Sure.
through the voter challenges, we're finding that there are some cases where it seems like that change of address notification that the Postal Service, the best of my understanding, they send that to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State sends that to the county auditor.
Right.
Sometimes through returned mail, that would go directly to the county auditor. Somehow, though, that's not getting into that voter's record in some cases.
And so then they just sit there on the roll, sometimes in multiple states, because they've maybe re-registered to vote in another state. I know this is something we've seen frequently as well. And that's obviously a problem, because if somebody decides to, get a hold of that ballot, or because we don't even know that they're getting the ballot, we don't even know what happens, all mail-in voting system. So I know this is one of the concerns that I've had. I want to point out a couple things here, because Mary Hall, who is the Thurston County Auditor, and who I've known for a long time, she's been there for quite a while, she has come out and said that there is nothing to see here, right? And I want to play a little clip of her, what she just said recently to King 5 News, when Chris Ingalls interviewed her, and what she has to say about what's going on in Thurston County.
With all this review that's been going on, have you found a single vote where somebody has cast a vote illegally in your county?
We have not found any instance where somebody has voted illegally or there's something nefarious going on.
Now, we know that that's not true, right?
Yeah, that's a lie.
Okay. And let's talk about how we know it's a lie, right? It's easy to say that it's a lie, but I just want to look through a couple things that I know we've discussed and that you've pointed out in the past. Let's start with a Thurston County report, and we see right here, here's two of her employees that actually referred a case to the Thurston County Sheriff's Office just a couple years ago of actual, not my words, not your words, right, but their words, fraud and voter fraud.
Yes.
That happened.
Yes.
So when Mary Hall was interviewed by King 5 News, her own office had to put these reports in. Just like this. In this case, do you want to talk about this case right here?
Yeah. So I'll back up a little bit.
Sure.
So there were, through public records requests that I submitted in the summer of 2022, one of the things I asked for was records of any referrals made to the sheriff's office for voter fraud. And it turns out, after the 2020 election, the Thurston County Auditor's Office did refer two cases of voter fraud where the registered voter had been deceased and someone voted on that voter's behalf after the fact.
Okay.
And that was submitted by her office, by her staff, and investigated by the Thurston County Sheriff's Office.
And found to be true.
Yes.
And so, but she's saying that it's never happened.
Yes.
That's...
I don't know how she's saying that, or
Right.
maybe she doesn't know what's going on
Right.
in her own office, but as the elected official in charge of that office, she should really know this.
Okay.
I think it's just another example of government misinformation when it comes to elections. There's continual dishonesty, misinformation, refusal to release records they're required to release, hiding information,
Sure.
changing laws to reduce transparency.
Right. Of which Mary Hall's been actually a leading person in Olympia, in the state capitol. She has consistently been trying to conceal and find ways of hiding more records at the auditor's offices. This has been a continuous problem I've seen.
It has.
I want to show another record here just for our viewers. And you can see here's another referral that came out of the Thurston County Auditor's Office again. And again, not my words, but theirs. Fraud, voter fraud. And in this case, they referred it to Arizona because, you want to talk about this case too.
Yeah. So this particular case is interesting because the voter deceased. After the voter deceased, someone contacted the Thurston County Auditor's Office and pretended to be that voter. They said, I'm her and I'm at my winter address down in Arizona. Will you send my ballot to me? And so they did. They believed that this was the actual voter. They sent the ballot down there. The person filled it out, signed it, sent it back. And some interesting things are illuminated by this. So the first one is how easy it is to call up or go online on VoteWa and pretend you're someone else, impersonate a voter, and actually steal that voter's identity, right? I would call that voter identity theft.
Right.
Because a lot of times all they're asking for is to confirm their date of birth.
Right.
Well, that's public record. It's really easy to get. Or a social security number. If you know where to look, that's really easy to find too. You just go on the dark web.
Right.
And so, they're not actually verifying, is this physically the actual registered voter?
Right.
There's only so much they can do to verify that without looking at an ID and seeing the person stand before them.
Right.
And so in this case, the person got through whatever controls they have set up, redirected the ballot, and then when the ballot came back, it passed through the signature verification.
Okay.
Right? And the signature verification, when ballots are being processed, that's like the only fail-safe. They have the last fail-safe in the system,
Right.
where they're trying to, weed out people who aren't the registered voter or fraudulent votes.
Right.
But this one made it through. The one in the last case you displayed also made it through signature verification.
Okay.
So the election worker determined that the signatures matched, but when the sheriff's office investigated these afterwards, the sheriff's deputy looked at the envelope that the ballot came in, looked at the signatures on file, and said, these clearly don't match.
Right.
So somehow these signatures that don't match are getting through and allowing people to vote under other people's voter registrations.
Now, I know even before the 2020 election, there's been problems like this that have been documented in Thurston County. Do you want to talk about some of those that you've uncovered through records requests?
Yes, so I did get some records through a records request showing that from around 2016 through 2020.
All of which time Mary Hall was the Thurston County Auditor.
Right. And I believe there were around 85 voters, at least there were 85 files they sent me of voters who had voted twice or who had signed two different ballot envelopes in the same election,
Okay.
which is a crime. It's called double voting. There's
Right.
an RCW on the books there.
Right.
You're only supposed to send in one. And, some
It's
of
not
them,
King County, right? So, no, you're only supposed to send in one ballot. Yeah.
some of them looked like maybe they had been innocent mistakes. Others, I think there was one where there were multiple, not just one other ballot, but
Right.
multiple other ballots. And in some cases, they sent out warning letters to these individuals.
Right.
But there was no record of those ever being referred to the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, even though that was, that would have been in my request, that the records they sent me,
Right.
had they had it. So that's very troubling. They basically, get a nastygram in the mail, a warning
Right.
letter,
Yeah.
and not
Please
even a
don't
slap
commit
on the
vote
wrist.
fraud again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please don't commit vote fraud. Yeah.
And that's what gets me about this, because when you're in there, I've gone in and I've observed the ballot processing during
Right.
the elections, and you talk to the election workers, many of whom are very nice, very competent people. I don't have problems with most of the work that they're doing.
Right.
But you talk to them about, and they say, well, voter fraud is rare. Well, why do you say that? Well, there's a 10-year, it's 10 years in prison. It's a felony.
Right.
But if they're not being referred to the sheriff's office, or if the cases that are referred to the sheriff's office aren't being prosecuted, then there's no real deterrence there.
Right.
There's really nothing stopping people from committing voter fraud.
Right. Because no matter how many people they catch, nobody's being charged with a felony.
Right.
I'm not aware of anybody actually gets charged with a felony in Washington when they get caught committing vote fraud.
Yeah. And the first case that you put on the screen there, that individual, the perpetrator, is local, lives in Thurston County.
Right.
Originally, he denied that he signed, it was like a deceased family member's ballot.
Right.
He said, no, I didn't sign that. He had dated the ballot for a date that was before the ballots were even issued. So
Right.
it was like impossible for the ballot to have been signed on that date.
Right.
But eventually he admitted it to the deputy. He admitted basically double voting. That's the violation there. Also forgery, because he forged the signature. And also you could say making a false statement.
Right.
There's a lot of criminal statutes that were violated there. The Thurston County Sheriff's Office referred that to the Thurston County Prosecutor's Office.
Right.
Prosecutor John Thunheim, as of last year when I did the records request, not done a single thing about it. The
Right.
prosecutor's file that they sent me was just a blank page.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and there's a couple other things that you've talked about, and when you're doing some work in Thurston County, as we're starting to get to better, laymen, right, coming in from the outside, volunteers like yourself, like many other people that are looking at this, it's a wonkish process, right, to get in here and dig into this and kind of sort through what exactly is going on. And of course, it's made more difficult when the people who are running these departments are accusing you of being a tremendous threat to democracy. And I want to play just a clip here of Mary Hall, the Thurston County Auditor, accusing you of being a great threat to democracy for daring to look into this.
It is a concern because I think what they're doing is undermining democracy.
You're undermining democracy. How dare you?
I would submit that lying about whether or not there's been substantiated cases of voter fraud in Thurston County, I think that undermines democracy a lot more than what we're doing. Right? Because all we're doing is asking questions. We're just trying to figure out what's really going on here. What are the facts? And if that's undermining democracy, then I guess their system that they're so proud of can't really hold up well to scrutiny. As soon as you start asking questions, they start with the personal attacks.
Right. And that's a real troubling aspect of this whole thing. I think that I think people have to realize, and I know you do because you've been getting a lot of the brunt of this kind of attention, because I think you're successfully and methodically going through and actually, it's not a lot of emotion, it's not waving your hands in the air, you're just methodically going down the path of documenting what's happening in Thurston County. And I know other people are doing this in other counties in Washington State too, and I've tried to, we're the Washington Voter Research Project, the whole reason we set this up was to give kind of an umbrella so that volunteers could trade information and be set up to do this. What are some of the other things that you've uncovered that you just want people to be aware of as your weaknesses in the system or other things that you believe that people should know?
Well, one thing I would talk about is the signature verification. Because we don't have any voter ID requirements, and because we're not voting in person, really the only thing they have to go on when they're checking ballots is to match the signature. Does the signature match? And I've observed elections at Thurston County for several election cycles, and most of their operations I think are secure. They're very well done. However, signature verification is problematic. I noticed a lot of inconsistencies between different staff who were performing signature verifications, and I've had the same training that they've had from the Washington State Patrol on signature verification, and because I did a lot of that work in my work with the state, working forgery cases and things. So when I see, I'll see one worker who's being very diligent, who is questioning or challenging the signatures that I think should be challenged. And then you see other workers who are just kind of letting everything through. Or if there's one that clearly doesn't match, they'll just agonize for a long time over whether to, challenge this one or not. And it just seems like there's a bias towards letting them through. Because we maybe they're worried about depriving people of their right to vote. But here's the thing. When you let through an invalid signature, when you're letting someone vote who's not the actual registered voter, you're actually disenfranchising a legal vote. That illegal vote is canceling out a legal vote. So signature verification is one problem. Another problem is what I call the signature update loophole. So get this. When a ballot gets sent back, and let's say the signature verifier says these signatures don't match, okay? What happens next? It gets looked at by a second person who looks at it, and if that second person says these signatures don't match, then the voter gets sent a letter. It says, your signatures don't match, and they send them what's called a signature update form. And it says, sign this form and send it back to us. And, it sounds nice and innocent, but here's how it works in practice. So the 2021 election, I wanted to test this procedure and see how it worked. So to sign my ballot, I just did like a straight line, which is not my signature. And I was like, are they even going to catch this? Well, they caught it, thankfully. They sent me the signature update letter. And I signed that with my regular signature and sent it back. And they didn't count that vote because the regular signature and the signature on the ballot envelope didn't match. Now, and this was explained to me by one of the election workers. This is also the process outlined in the WAC, the Washington Administrative Code. So remember, I did a straight line on my ballot, right? Not my real signature. If I had sent back that signature update form and put the same straight line on that, they would have added that straight line as my official signature in the voter file.
And then that would be how you'd have to sign it from there on.
Yeah, well, one of the ways I could sign it.
Right.
And the loophole there is if let's say I'm a bad actor,
Right.
and I'm stealing someone's voter identity. Maybe I figured out someone's information.
Or you're just taking them out of the post office box, the ones that are just sitting there loose.
Or that,
Right.
yeah. And I get a hold of someone's ballot, and I vote it illegally. I forge a signature. If I get that signature verification letter, update letter, and I sign the signature the same way, that's going to legitimize the fraud. That's going to take a fraudulent vote, a fraudulent voter, and make it legal.
The other thing I heard you talk about once that I was really interested in was UCAVA voting, which is this overseas mostly voting. And you've talked about some of the problems related to that. And I know I've had some calls from journalists about, are you trying to disenfranchise the military vote, right? That's oftentimes that's the angle that Mary Hall repeats all the time.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit just for our voters, or for our viewers, because I think that this is another little wonkish thing, but it's important for people to know.
Yeah, and this was something I wasn't fully aware of at first, and I kind of picked up as we worked with this wonkish topic.
Right, right.
So UCAVA, it's the Uniformed Overseas Civilians Access to Voting Act, I think is
Right.
what it is. And basically, it's one of the residency exceptions. For persons deployed overseas for the government or in the military, they can vote from a previous address where they lived.
Right.
And so, I would say, I think around 25% of when we did door-to-door canvassing, our voter anomalies, the people who didn't live at that address anymore but were still voting,
Right.
Probably about a quarter of those ended up being military, according to the Thurston County Auditor's Office. And but in conversations with the Auditor's Office, what I learned was there's no verification of that. So for someone to claim that they're a military voter and get a special voting status, in Washington State, nobody's verifying that. All they do is check a box.
Right.
That's what a lot of our voting and voter information, you're just checking a box that you're a citizen, you're checking a box that you're military or you meet some other exception.
Right.
But there's no verification. You don't have to provide supporting documents. You don't have to provide anything. So that's a perfect vehicle for someone to target that type of voter to try to take over their voter identity because nobody's going to look at it. And if we try to challenge those voters under recent RCW change this year, we cannot challenge them. And we cannot compel that voter to maybe show up in the hearing and prove that they're actually due this exemption.
And I've seen a study from some other states where they've talked about 61% of those UCAVA voters aren't military or dependents at all.
Yeah. Yeah, over time, in the beginning, UCAVA was mostly military.
Right.
And then over the last 10 or 15 years, it's kind of shifted and it's a lot of civilian. And then there's the federal postcard application where you can just fill out a postcard and send it in and they have to register you to vote. And
There's no ID requirements or anything else.
And so with my background in working in program integrity,
Right.
For a benefit program administered by the state, we always verified that kind of information about people.
Right.
People make a claim, I'm entitled to this. Okay, well, sure, we'll trust but verify.
Right.
We're going to probably let you in, but let's check some documents first and
Right.
make sure you are who you say you are and, the facts of the circumstances. But
Right.
that doesn't happen in elections. Everything is based on voter attestation.
And that's a real challenge and a big hole. And this is why we need, I think voter integrity is so important because bad votes cancel out real votes. And that's just as much disenfranchising voters as anything else. And so when elected officials like Mary Hall or others are threatening or accusing people of being a danger to democracy or anything like that, I think what they're really doing is saying, shut up, don't look, we're going to close the doors, trust us, black box voting, mystery magical behind the scenes stuff. And this is, I don't think, good for anybody in a representative government at all, to be accepting that. So I really appreciate the work that you've been doing, John.
Thank you.
I think it's really important. And thank you for taking the heat, because I know Mary Hall has been very, this has been pretty aggressive to listen to some of the stuff that she said on the air. I'd like to we'll kind of finish up this interview right now. I'd like to do another segment with you if you don't mind staying here, and we'll
Sure.
talk about kind of how the media has been covering this. And is there any last thought you want to leave our viewers today on this subject?
Yeah, I would like to say that, first of all, if you move or someone moves and you get one of those confirmation notices from the auditor about updating your address, fill it out and send it back. It's a huge thing that the everyday person can do to help strengthen election integrity. You know, a percentage of these cases that we're finding and that we're challenging are just people who moved, who never updated their address. Maybe they just never sent back the confirmation notice or things like that. There are other ones, though, that we're looking into that are really suspicious, where, you know, the person never lived at this address. How were they added to vote from this address?
Right.
And some of these, once they get through the challenge process, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on and talk to the individual. And
Well, good. Then
find out
we want to bring you
what
back
are the
in.
facts.
Yeah, we want to
Yes.
bring you back in and talk about that
Yes.
then. All right, I just want to we'll end this right now. We'll do stay around. We'll talk about King 5 News and
All right.
how they're covering the story. So with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching the video today. Stay tuned for part 2, and we will continue. And remember, just like John's doing right now, if you want to make a difference, you got to show up, because the future, it does belong to those who show up.